In this tutorial, we're going to be learning how you can put your digital assets to work through lending and borrowing. You know that you can use your digital assets as collateral. You can pledge them and deposit them on certain lending and borrowing protocols. And then once you deposit them, you can use them as collateral and then borrow against them and use that borrowed capital for whatever you want, be it to repay a specific loan, to meet short-term expenses, to invest in a new business, or to double down on your investment in a specific digital asset. So let's go through this example step by step. For the sake of this example, we're going to be using Aave, but keep in mind that there are multiple different lending and borrowing platforms that are available out there. For this example only, we're going to be using Aave, but keep in mind that Solana also have many different platforms, BNB, Binance, and Sui. Mainly, most of the major layer one networks already have protocols that allows you to basically lend and borrow. So you go to aave.com, as you can see here. Make sure always double check that the URL is verified and the correct one. Once you are sure that it's the correct one, you go to use Aave. So you have Aave v3 and Aave Pro v4. Aave Pro v4 is the newer version. The difference between them is beyond this scope. I will be doing a separate video on the difference between Aave v3 and Aave v4 at a later stage. But for the sake of this example, we're going to stick with the widely used version 3 of Aave. So you click on it. And then once you're inside, here's how you basically navigate the dashboard. Or the protocol. So the first step you have is the dashboard. Of course, you cannot see anything if you did not connect your wallet. So the first step is connect your wallet. I'm going to be choosing Phantom for this example. Connect. And this is our dashboard. So in the dashboard, you see what tokens you have supplied, what tokens you have borrowed. And for now, we didn't supply or borrow anything, and that's why they are zero. You see the assets that are sitting in your wallet that you can use as collateral and deposit into the platform. And then you can see the assets that you are allowed to borrow against the assets that you have. Next, we continue and we navigate into the markets tab. So the markets tab shows you all the available markets or networks, if you want, where you can see the different digital assets that you can pledge as collateral and deposit and earn yield on basically lending your digital assets and putting them to work. And you can also see the borrow APY and how much you will have to pay in terms of interest if you decide to borrow a specific asset. So at the top here, in the drop down list, you see all the available networks that are available on Aave, keeping in mind that Aave operates on Ethereum. Therefore, you will only find Ethereum compatible chains and EVM chains. So these are, of course, Ethereum Core, Prime, and Aave Horizon. You have layer one networks such as Plasma, Avalanche, BNB, Gnosis, Aptos, and Sonic. You have layer two networks on Ethereum, which are Base, Arbitrum, Mantle, Polygon, and you name it. So for the sake of this example, we're going to be choosing Base because obviously the fees on Base are extremely low and it's a super fast chain. So I tend to use it the most. But keep in mind that you can also use all the available chains that are available here. Here you see the total market size, which is currently sitting at 769 million. Total available, which is basically the total amount that can be borrowed, remaining to be borrowed, is 438 million. And total borrows currently sitting at 330 million. So there is 330 million of 769 million that are currently borrowed, with the 438 remaining for whoever wants to basically borrow from the base market. Keeping in mind that each market has different stats. So for Ethereum, for example, the market size is 20.22 billion. There is still right now 11.35 billion worth of collateral that can be borrowed or digital assets that can be borrowed. And currently there is 8.54 billion that have been borrowed already. So going back to base, here you see all the assets that are within this specific market. So definitely the asset list differs between different markets. You see the total supplied of that specific token. the supply APY. So right now, if I deposit USDC, I will earn 3.22% in terms of annual percentage yield. This is if I when I supply USDC to Aave, I'm basically lending my USDC on the Aave platform for whoever wants to borrow. And currently, I get paid 3.22% for doing so. Here you have the total amount borrowed. So there is 152.45 million USDC tokens that have been borrowed so far from a total supply of 181. If you want to borrow, you will pay 4.29% interest rate. And this just goes to show you how cheaper it is to basically borrow from decentralized finance rather than centralized finance. Right now, if you are in the US and you want to take out a loan to buy a house, for example, you would pay somewhere between 5 to 7%. Right now, if you go to the decentralized finance market, you can borrow for 4.29% only. If I click on the details here, this is where it basically show you all the information you need to know about that specific asset. And the reserve size is currently sitting at $177 million, available liquidity 16.82, utilization rate is 90%. So 90% of all the ETH that are supplied on the base market on Aave is already used. There is only 9.5% left to be borrowed. And the Oracle price is 2,303. Now, scrolling down, you see all the information about the supply and borrow. So supply is lending. Here you see that there is 45.50% already used. So total supplied is around 76.89 thousand Ethereum that are supplied into Aave out of 169,000 allowed. So there is 45.5% utilization rate. The current supply rate is 1.22%. So if you supply or you lend your ETH on Aave on the base network, or the base market, you will get 1.22%, which is obviously low. If I zoom out, you can see here for the past year how much the yield has been. And as you can see, it fluctuates a lot, basically, or it fluctuates between 3% and almost 0. Or 1%, I would say. 1 to 3% is the range. This range changes depend on supply and demand, how much people are borrowing, how much people are supplying, and obviously there is incentive depending on how much is being supplied and how much is being borrowed. So if there is a lot of borrowing happening, then the supply APY goes up to incentivize users to deploy their Ethereum because there is a lot of borrowing demand. And the opposite is true. If there isn't a lot of people borrowing, then the APY goes way down to stop incentivizing people from basically supplying Ethereum because there is a lot of Ethereum that is basically supplied at the moment. So this is the dashboard and how to read it here. The collateral usage liquidation threshold is 83%. So here, if your loan to value ratio crosses 83%, you get liquidated automatically. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on when you are lending. You need to ensure if you are borrowing, of course, but if you're not borrowing, this is irrelevant to you. If you are borrowing against that supplied collateral that you put here, then you need to keep an eye on the liquidation threshold to make sure that you never come close to it. Because if you do, and keeping in mind that the crypto market is extremely volatile, you risk losing all your collateral. And this is a liquidation penalty. So when a liquidation occurs, liquidations repay up to 50%, or liquidators repay up to 50% of the outstanding borrowed amount on behalf of the borrower. So they liquidate them and they just pay half of their outstanding borrowed amount. In return, they can buy the collateral at a discount and keep the difference, which is basically the liquidation penalty as a bonus. So instead of paying the full collateral price, they pay 50% and they get the liquidation penalty as a bonus as well. So they would pay around 45%. Now, looking at the borrow info, same story here. You have 48.67% utilization. APY is 1.59%. So if you are borrowing Ethereum right now, you would pay 1.59% per year as interest. Keeping in mind that the loans here do not have a specific term, meaning that once you open a loan, once you borrow in decentralized finance, you're not obliged to return them at a specific date. You can keep the loan open as long as you want. And obviously, the longer you keep it open, the more interest you're paying. So this is a huge difference between traditional finance and decentralized finance. In traditional finance, you have specific time or mortgage date where you must repay the loan, the principal plus the interest, while in decentralized finance, you can keep it open as long as you want. So zooming out here, you can clearly see also that the APY throughout the whole year did fluctuate, but it is between 3% to, I would say, the lowest, which is we are in right now, around 1.4%. Now we come to how you basically deploy and supply your assets. So simply here, I navigate to Ethereum rather than wrapped ETH because this is what I have at the moment in my wallet. I click on supply. So I choose the total amount, collateral options. So the difference between the both here is that if I choose this one, I can only borrow wrapped ETH, while this one I can borrow any kind of or all eligible assets. Obviously, I'm going to be choosing this one. Supply APY is 1.22, and I basically supply the Ethereum, confirm. Here you can also add the A token to your wallet so you can also see your balance, because once you supply to Aave, you get a receipt token, A token. So in this case, we receive A ETH that will be available in our wallet. Okay, close. Let's see if it's already available. So we can see it here. As you can see, Aave v3 wrapped ETH. So even though I deposited using ETH, the protocol already wrapped my Ethereum token, so the protocol can basically use it and gave me a receipt token so I can keep track of it in my own wallet. So this is how you can lend. Effectively, right now, I am lending my Ethereum on Aave, and I'm earning 1.22% year over year, or annual percentage rate. If I go back to the dashboard here, you can see that this is right now used as lending. Let's do another example with USDC. So let's say I want to use supply USDC here. I choose maximum, I approve, confirm, and then I approve USDC to continue, confirm again, and then I supply my USDC, confirm. Okay, great. So in a bit, I should start seeing the USDC as supplied here. We'll just give it a moment and potentially refresh the page. So now you can clearly see that I have two assets that are being supplied or lent out on Aave. The total net worth of both assets is 27 bucks, and I am getting 2.14% in terms of net APY. So if I want to borrow right now against my assets, there is two ways that I can do so. I can do it from the dashboard itself. These are the eligible assets that I can borrow, or I can click on USDC, and then from here I can just borrow USDC alone. But of course, it's better to stay on the dashboard because you can clearly see all the assets that you can borrow. Let's say I want to borrow BTC against my USDC. So you click on borrow here, and I pay 0.79% to borrow Bitcoin. So if I click on max, you can clearly see that the liquidation factor or health factor dropped to 1.01. What you need to know, once the health factor drops below 1, you get liquidated. So the fact that it's telling you 1.01, it's extremely close to being liquidated, and you shouldn't do that whatsoever, because a minor change in the price of Bitcoin, if you get liquidated. So what I should do instead, I should lower my borrowed amount, or I should add to my collateral, one of the two. So let's say in this case, I'm gonna be lowering it to half the amount. You can clearly see that your health factor is now better, but it's still not perfect. It's still not green. What you need to aim for is for it to be green. So I keep going down. Here you go. For example, if I need to borrow right now, I'm borrowing with the amount of around $3.22 versus a supplied collateral of $12. So I'm around 33% loan to value ratio. So once I do so, I click on borrow CBTC, CBBTC. So this is Coinbase wrapped BTC. You can clearly see the transaction here, confirm, and I'm done. It's as simple as this. Right now, you can see that the Coinbase wrapped BTC is already available in my wallet. And if I refresh here, I think I also see the health factor. So this is my health factor. This is the full dashboard. I have borrowed BTC, CBTC, balance 3.22. This is how much I'm paying in interests. And This is the balance that I have in terms of the assets that are supplied, APY, the health factor. In the event where you borrow against your digital assets, it makes a lot of sense to set reminders to check regularly on your health factor and check on your positions, because again, the crypto market can be extremely volatile. So in order for you to avoid any liquidations and losing your collateral, ensure that you are regularly checking your positions and adding collateral if your health factor goes down, or paying back your loan and reducing your loan again if your health factor goes down and risk of being liquidated. So this is how you basically lend and borrow against your assets. And if you wish to reverse all of these transactions, it's pretty straightforward. So if you want to repay here, you can directly repay by depositing the same asset that you borrowed. So in this case, it will be CBBTC, which is already available in our wallet. So I simply click on maximum, and then I can basically repay my loan. Another solution would be to also repay using your collateral. So you pay back the loan by basically depositing collateral and adding more collateral to a point where you basically have repaid all your loan, and this is how you basically repay your borrowed amount. And if you want to withdraw your assets and stop lending them, you simply click on withdraw. You click on max, but of course in this case I cannot, because I already have borrowed amount, so I will not be able to withdraw my assets. First I have to repay my loan, then I withdraw my assets.